Uncle Trump has one shot, one opportunity to stop the death of America. One moment with the freedom of interest, but with DC written, y'all. Vivek's palms are sweaty, six big job gets heavy. There's curry on his sweater already, mom's tandoori. He's nervous, but DOD is getting order ready to drop bombs, cause he gon' got the fat with Eddie. He goes down, DC crowd cries so loud. He opens his mouth, the words you find just come out. They choking now, we the people joking now. The clock's run out, time's up, over, back. Snap back, DOGE, Lord, they swing gravity. Oh, grab your rock, when he choke, he's so ready. No boast, make it look easy. No, he works at it, he knows he'll push him in. Gotta keep him alive. Stand together. Start World War III. Make America great again.
Greetings, conversationalists from across the fruited plain. This is the MAGA Kingdom Report for May 26, 2025. This is show number 20. My name is Frank Scavo. I'm here with my co-host, Anastasia Theodoropoulos, and Dr. Richard Panzer is on assignment in Tennessee. I'm going to ask something of you for the show. Get ready to share it. Get ready to send to friends and family, because this show is a blockbuster. First, we start off with, was Obama hypothesizing or planning a third term? Then, who was really running the country? The question we all have. Was Biden's dementia cover-up a conspiracy? Then we go to oncologist Dr. William Makis, and he explains turbo cancers. Then, unfortunately, Scott Adams proclaims, who has right after disclaiming having same cancer as Joe Biden, and unfortunately the author of Dilbert is dying. Then the Canadian government is testing to spray COVID mRNA via planes. Then we have, this is the truth, this is what you'll need to share. Dr. David E. Martin takes down the WHO, the truth the entire world needs to know, and this is proof. Then we jump into Scripture of the Week, Matthew 10 of 22. And then the music video, We the People by Kid Rock. Warning, it's got adult language for the unlawful use of carnal knowledge. So, Anastasia, if we're ready, this show is going to be a blockbuster. Like I said, get ready to share. Get ready to find out what is going on in these United States and the entire world.
And you're right, Frank. This is a big show. People need to know the truth. The truth has been coming out slowly, but we're here to tell you a lot has gone on this past week, especially with Biden's cry of cancer and
Right.
The fact that this is a very progressive cancer that's got in the bones, and many have identified something that should have been there for many, many years. So what was really
there.
going on?
It was there.
So this has kind of spiraled into taking a look at what exactly has been going on these last few years, who is running our country, and in fact, if we have this massive amounts of cancer that are coming out, well, why is that happening, and what is that an outcome of? So we're going to delve all into that, as you said. Let's take a first look at, because we really need to identify, was President Obama honest about being asked about a third term? And if so, was it really the plan? And I think knowing what we know today, we have to look back at it as that being the starting point.
Right.
People would ask me, knowing what you know now, do you wish like you had a third term? And I used to say, you know what? If I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats, looking through the stuff, and then I could sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and ceremony. Wow. I'd be fine.
So we all kind of remember that, but it seemed more like a joke when it was first came out.
Well, in standalone, yes, but as we look at our next slide, you're going to see where all of a sudden we connect these dots, because Steve Bannon said, if there are no coincidences, then there are no conspiracies, and you know that. This is all conspiracy.
Right, and one thing we could say for sure is the Biden dimension cover-up is one of the biggest scandals
Exactly.
in our American political history. So we are talking about, exactly what we're talking about is a president who is allegedly not running possibly the show, while his handlers kept everything under wraps. Now, that is definitely an option right now, especially as we uncover this.
Now, remember, his handlers include the lying, racketeering, collusional, conspiratorial media narrative. And we're just discovering this as Jake Tapper miraculously writes a book and now has a memory, unlike Joe Biden. So
yeah, he might sell 3 or 4 books now because of that, I got to tell you. But we have to thank also O'Keefe and
James
his
O'Keefe,
team.
OMG Media, oh my God, or O'Keefe Media Group, either one.
So you got to catch this one, folks.
Who would you say is the most powerful person at the White House?
Jeff.
Jeff is the most powerful person at the White House.
Other than like the president. There's probably like 5 or 6 people that work for Joe Biden and have worked for him for 30 years. One of them is Ron Clay. Ron worked for Biden when he was like a senator. There's a guy named Steve Ricchetti. He's like a senior advisor at the White House. Anita Dunn. Yeah, she's a senior advisor at the White House. Gene Sperling. He's an economics guy. Oh, his sister, Biden's sister, she like runs the Biden Foundation. They're the people that run his different departments. If they put it on his desk saying like, hey, we think you should do this, they'll probably sign it.
So I feel like Barack Obama's still very like involved.
No, he is.
Yeah, Hillary was being interviewed, and she said, "I still talk to the White House every day."
She has people that are like super close to her that are still like senior people in the White House.
So who is she talking to in the White House?
Probably near Tandon.
I hope that Hillary's still involved behind the scene because
No, she is.
Treasonous Barack Obama, and that's what comes up. He was the key. And Hillary Clinton were running the White House under Joe Biden. Obama is very involved, says Tyler Robinson, special advisor to the administrator, U.S. Small Business Administration, working directly as a deputy to the chief of staff, Ron Klain, who Roger Stone said, if they steal the election in 2020, it'll be Ron Klain, who works for who? Barack Obama. And he says in this long 18-minute undercover video, he says, well, basically you gave it to Ron Klain. He was the president, he says. And he says, but this person was also like the president. But they didn't have to give it to Biden. They did whatever they wanted.
Well, it all leads to connecting the dots. It's great to see Alex Jones back again. 5 years ago, 3 years ago, Alex Jones, a lot of stuff what he said we would take with a grain of salt. Now he seems to be the guy in the front lines.
He's gotten 1,000 these days.
Absolutely so. But yeah, you know what? These people that were just named are all bad business people. They are spending your money. Look, they wine and dine, as you see with the O'Keefe Media Group, OMG, and they make all these bad decisions that benefit them and not these United States, not the people. So when there's a group of dastardly people like that, you wonder why America's on the wrong track. That's why, because they don't have business sense and they don't care about us. Whereas us, we wouldn't do that because something deep inside of us shows that we care. So, yeah. Now,
Well, I was going to say, that the puppet master's never seen, right?
puppet master's never seen. And
But we
those
see the
guys-
strings now.
Well, no, only because of guys like Roger Stone, because of Steve Bannon, because of O'Keefe Media Group and Alex Jones and anybody. There's some local actors that we know about that we could say the same thing. But, we're going to jump into now. Natalie Winters, she's the co-host of Bannon's War Room. She's got some truth bombs here. So let's take a look and we'll come right back and discuss it.
That is sort of seeding that is an outrage for respectfully people who will come on this program. I would say that you should maybe study the prerequisites to be commander in chief or the president of the United States. I think it's more than just a surge of adrenaline that maybe gives you a 50% chance to maybe make a good decision. I'd also posit that maybe certain other presidential candidates, whether President Trump or Democrats, wouldn't have actually had to have stood up to Putin because he wouldn't have invaded like he didn't under President Trump, because they wouldn't wouldn't have had someone who was essentially dead, either from a mental cognizance perspective or even just an actual health standard. And I think if you look at the legacy of the Biden regime, it's cover up after cover up after cover up. And I'm so glad that Antony Blinken is very adamant that Joe Biden had a really good sense of geopolitics. I really disagree with that. I think that's just a continuation of this cover-up. I think you should have been asking Antony Blinken who was actually running the show. And it's really quite interesting. You think he had such a great geopolitical track record. I think the 13 families of the people in Afghanistan who died because of Joe Biden's botched withdrawal would certainly beg to differ with you on that. Maybe he just needed some more adrenaline, but that's an absolutely asinine take. The guy was obviously sick from day one while he was in office. And no offense, if they were going to lie about the mental health and the actual health of a president, so much so that even when he said on stage admitting to having cancer in 2022, they continued to cover it up. They called it a gaffe. The media ran cover for him. If they were willing to cover for something that huge, what else were they lying about? So I don't take Antony Blinken's word for 1 second that Joe Biden had a good sense of self when he was making decisions if he was willing to sit there as Secretary of State and say absolutely nothing for 4 years when Joe Biden was covering up truly one of the largest, I would say, health scandals, bigger than Watergate, of our time.
Rapid fire. That sums up the last 4 years right there. What else were they covering up? You know what? I remember Joe Biden was in Delaware, and remember he said, I wake up every morning with an oil film on my windshield. That's why a lot of us in Delaware have cancer, which DuPont and other companies are in Delaware. But they lied. They covered it up. In his own words, they said, no, Joe, you don't have cancer, which we now know he did at that time. He let it slip out because the whole presidency was a lie.
Well, here's the other thing, too. Which is really great seeing Natalie Winters, who just
young, right?
Young, a female, super smart, and it's the example. It's the example how the truth rings loud and clear, and everyone there were just absolutely stunned and couldn't even respond to her facts. And that is the time we're living in right now, where the media is absolutely
lying,
exposed.
racketeering, collusional, conspiratorial narratives. She threaded that needle with so much in such a minute and 47 seconds. It was like, yeah, that's the Biden administration from day one through death.
And here's the other thing. So we talk about our neighboring countries, right? Because, COVID affected the entire world.
Right.
Whatever you want to say about it, there was no one
worldwide
who escaped.
Pandemic, scamdemic.
Absolutely. So we look at Canada as, our neighboring neighbors on the north. And there are some famous doctors. We've actually, Frank, covered Dr. William Makis, who's a Canadian oncologist, before on the show. And what he says on his show is incredible, because he says, we have never seen cancers behaving like this before. And that is why they have dubbed, the second time we've been talking about it, but it's important because it really relates to especially what might be going on right now with President Biden, which is the effect of turbo cancer.
Cancer on a rampage.
Let's take a look.
There are only a handful out of the 100,000 doctors, Canadian doctors, that didn't take the vaccine that are still practicing medicine. So it's something like 99.9% vaccination rate. And they were the first ones to line up for their vaccines. Well, as I started looking at the sudden deaths of Canadian doctors, I realized, yes, most of them are dying from cardiac issues, heart injuries, cardiac arrests, dying while jogging or swimming, dying in their sleep. And Dr. Peter McCullough has talked about this extensively, about the myocarditis and the damage to the heart, the scarring to the heart. And then some were dying from blood clots, pulmonary emboli, strokes. But then there was quite a large subset of doctors who were developing extremely aggressive cancers. And cancers at an age that they shouldn't be getting. So, for example, there was a doctor who developed gastric cancer in his 30s. Presented at stage 4, he was dead in less than a year. Very rare brain cancers in young individuals in their 20s and 30s, medical students, medical residents. And these cancers would always present at stage 4, and they would always kill them in a matter of a few months, and it was always less than a year. And, at first I didn't know, what the term for this was or what the phenomenon was. I just started, really paying attention to it, tracking it. I then, realized that this is being called turbo cancer, by people on social media. Turbo cancer is not a medical term, but it's a term that people came up with to really describe the extremely aggressive nature of these cancers in the COVID vaccinated. And these cancers behave completely differently, unlike anything I've seen before in my career. And I've diagnosed over 20,000 cancer patients in my career with cutting-edge PET-CT, positron emission tomography imaging, CT, MRI, pathological correlation. I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen stage 4 breast cancers presenting in women in their 20s. I've never seen stage 4 colon cancers presenting in men and women in their, 20s, 30s. Leukemias that will kill you in a matter of days or even hours after diagnosis. Lymphomas that, again, kill you in a matter of months.
This is incredible. This is not our imagination. These are hard, cold facts. Why have things over the last couple of years changed so incredibly quickly? Why are people dying like this younger than ever? Do your own research, but it seems like the numbers don't lie.
We waste billions of dollars relocating and flying illegal aliens into these United States. Why isn't there a study? You have to come up with the term turbo cancer, and the term was originated by people in the industry that have been in it for 60 years, right? And they've never seen cancer behave like this. So what's the root cause? That's the only thing Kamala Harris ever said that made any sense. Look at the root cause. So we probably don't have funding for studies because it's linked to the mRNA, Kung Flu, SARS-CoV-2 COVID. Because if the turbo cancers are this prevalent, they don't want to let you know that the vax is the root cause of these turbo cancers. So, yeah.
Well, here's the other thing, too, because not only did President Biden come out this past week with his cancer, but we had someone else who was also very famous and loved.
Yeah.
Scott Adams, the author and Dilbert cartoonist, and he revealed that he also is suffering from metastatic prostate cancer, which is the same exactly that Biden has. And in case you didn't know it, now you know it is 100% not curable. So he stated, some of you may guess, and it wouldn't surprise you, but he has the same thing. And let's take a look at this video because he actually questions who are the smartest and happiest people. And this is very interesting because I'd like to see how many people will come out with this comment. Let's take a look.
Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you that the anti-vaxxers appear to be right. Somebody who did not get vaccinated, got a little Omicron, or maybe even a worse one, but recovered. Now you've got natural immunity, and you have no vaccination in you. Can we all agree that that was the winning path? The smartest, happiest people are the ones who didn't get the vaccination and are still alive. I want to make sure that I'm not leaving any wiggle room for myself. Have I? Have I said as clearly as possible they're the happy ones right now? And have a reason to be, completely. Right. Having said as clearly as possible that the anti-vax people seem to be the winners, I want you to hear that clearly. The anti-vax people appear to be the winners. The anti-vaxxers clearly are the winners at this point, and I think it'll probably stay that way. And I don't want to put any shade on that whatsoever. They came out the best. They have the winning position. The unvaccinated have a current advantage because they feel better. The thing they're not worrying about is what I have to worry about, which is, I wonder if that vaccination 5 years from now, because really the anti-vaxxers, I think, were really just distrustful of big companies and big government. That's never wrong. It's never wrong to distrust government. It's never wrong to distrust big companies, right? So if you just took the position, let's just distrust everything the government did, well, you won. You won. You won completely. I did not end up in the right place. Agree? You would all agree with that, right? I did not end up in the right place. The right place would be natural immunity, no vaccination. You should take victory, and I should take defeat. We can agree on that, right? That my position is now the weakest, and your position has gone from the weakest to the strongest, and that we can just say that's true. The people who didn't get vaxxed are absolutely in the winning position. You win. You win. You are the winners. You are the winners. All right, let me say that part with no ambiguity. You won. You won. All of my fancy analytics got me to a bad place. All of your heuristics, don't trust these guys, it's obvious, totally worked.
It is very bittersweet to see a hero, someone who with talent, and certainly someone who's been on the right side of politics. And unfortunately, we probably know more people like this who are just like Scott. And, he's brave for coming out like that.
He's helped so many people. He's done self-help books. He's a believer in self-healing, all these things. So he's not only a cartoon character, but I will tell you this. When COVID hit, Dr. Malone, father of the mRNA, came out with a video. I watched it 5 times and made the decision not to get it because Dr. Malone said this is for use on farms. It is a leaky vaccine. It's not going to cure anything. And right before me, your favorite J6 tour guide, went to jail, nurses called me, the most important people in my life, my father and my mother and my aunts. You have to get the vaccine, you're going to jail. I said, no, I'm not getting the vaccine no matter what happens. And to this day, I'm a pureblood. But just imagine if the amount of peer pressure and the lying, racketeering, collusional, conspiratorial media put pressure on the entire world, not only the United States, the entire world, to get vaccinated. So Scott Adams is right. Unfortunately, it got him, and we're just going to have to pray for him and remember his words. And, and here's another thing, Anastasia. As we move forward, the Canadian government wants to now go ahead and aerosolize, aerovax the people that are vaccine hesitant by, we have chemtrails. I don't know if they're going to, we have pictures of airplanes and helicopters. How are they going to do this to you? But the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, funded by the McMaster University in Canada, I always look to universities to poison the public, whether it's through thought or this vax. $8 million in taxpayer funding into how to aerosolize the mRNA vax, which you're seeing now, causes turbo cancers, causes blood clots. So we have some problems.
Yeah, and what's very interesting is, so they see people who are not wanting to take the booster. This is where it all came, that,
oh my God,
that the truth is out there, and they don't like people recognize that, listen, I got really sick, or I had this side effect, or I just don't trust, I don't have faith anymore, because I obviously can get COVID regardless of what you're telling me.
Of your vaccine status, exactly.
Right. So they come out first with an inhaler of the mRNA. So, now you don't have to take the injection, but it's a fallacy.
So it's still a vaccine. It's still a foreign substance entering your body.
Right. And then now here in Pennsylvania, for example, we have Senator Mastriano's bill that is fighting and bringing attention, thanks to our HHR Secretary, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, about the chemtrails. And now you have Canada, who wants to give you the end all of chemtrails. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
And they say why? They say they want populations to be vaccinated without their knowledge. Like, your government, any government, is unfriendly. This is.
Well, here's the other thing, that, the long term, because we know with like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, okay, when the nuclear bombs went off, there was a guaranteed certain amount of years of damage. Can you imagine this mRNA being sprayed across the forest lands? What is this going to do
Over
to our
crops,
natural? Yes.
herds of cows
It
and
can't be
pigs
destroyed. So they're playing with humanity. They're playing with the nature of our society again. And we got to say no, folks.
Now, remember, this is the blockbuster what's coming up next. But remember what former Vice President of these United States, Kamala Harris, said. Get to the root cause. The root cause of all this stuff is the WHO and they confess this, their COVID experimentations. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you see this video, it's fairly long. We could not find a place to stop or cut because the information builds upon itself, and this is the proof of everything that you ever thought was conspiratorial, which is now fact. So share this. This is blockbuster. And you told me this morning that this is over a year old, and it's the first time that I'm seeing it. And when I'm connected into War Room Steve Bannon, when we're connected into Alex Jones and O'Keefe Media and all these other groups, Jack Posobiec, Turning Point, I've never seen this. So here's the receipts. Here's how it went down, and here's why this thing needs to be stopped by you calling your congressman. So you want to jump into it?
Absolutely, and share, because I've been trying to bury the truth. And this had to happen in Europe, and the WHO was called out. And wait till you see it, folks, because Frank's 100% right. Let's get into it.
Well, the translators are gone, and the live stream is waning, which means that if we just listen to my colleague Matthias, the best thing in the world would be to leave it to you, the people. Now it's up to you to share what clearly, based on the cavernous emptiness we see in all of these spaces, is only going to be heard if you share it. So it feels very appropriate that I should be the one with the quietest voice. But let's let that lion roar, shall we? I'm done talking about COVID, and I'm done talking about SARS-CoV-2, and I'm done for a very simple reason. For 110 years, we, the people of the world, have been lied to. We're a group, a very small number of criminal, industrial conspirators decided to subordinate the entirety of the human population for the purpose of their sinister plans to enrich themselves while impoverishing and killing the rest of humanity. And I'm done being polite. We've long passed polite. When the words acceptable death rate become part of an industrial norm, we have lost the plot of humanity. And that's not my words. Those were the words of the World Health Organization and of Pfizer and of Moderna when they were given the authorization to begin the process of killing human beings in the interest of advancing their goals. Next slide. And I'm also not going to sugarcoat this. This is a criminal cartel. We are acting as though there's some sort of redeemable quality somewhere in some esoteric layer that somehow or another the World Health Organization must have some salutatory benefit. Well, I'm going to tell you, since its formation in the 1940s, the World Health Organization has been nothing more than a criminal cartel that has a sole and singular intent. And I will show you the document that proves what I'm saying. This is not an allegation. This is actually provable by their own words in their own hand. And they use a four-step process to execute every one of their nefarious plans. They begin by planning an exercise, then they go to the business of funding that exercise, then they create the rationale for the thing that they're going to do, and then they deploy and profit from it. And in violation of 15 U.S. Code Section 19, which for those of you listening, coincidentally started with the Clayton Act in the same year that the World Health Organization in the United States, 1913, The same year, the World Health Organization's progenitors also started. So I find it fascinating that we passed the Clayton Act in 1913, and we set in motion 110 years ago the criminal conspiracy, which we now call the World Health Organization. 110 years later. And in violation of TIFU, or TEFU, I don't even know how to say it, the TFEU, the treaty allegedly for the functioning of the European Union, which I think needs to now be called the Treaty for the Dysfunctional European Cabal. Article 101 unambiguously lays out the conditions that this was never a public health anything. It was racketeering for the purpose of instilling terror to adapt the behavior of a population. Period. That's what it was. That's what it always was. And we can come up with every theoretical argument we want to make about things, but the problem, even with the theory that we had an outbreak of something, is falsifiable for the data from Zurich that shows us that in the year of the death pandemic of the globe, life insurance companies paid $30 billion less in claims. Now, if there's a medical professional or a social professional or anybody else who wants to debate that we could develop a virus cunningly that could find out your bank account, your insurance policy statements, and whether you're paid up on your premiums, that's a big ask. It turns out that the data is unambiguous. We did not have a pandemic, we had genocide. And we need to call it what it is. Next slide. When I say we planned it, let's make sure we understand exactly the not-so-fine print of the fine print. And I want to call your attention first to the right-hand column of the slide. This is the 2011 data that the World Health Organization, the Wellcome Trust, PATH, and the Gates Foundation did on their wonderful worldwide program for a malaria vaccine for children under the age of 6 months of age. And in their clinical trial, it's helpful to point out that they murdered 66 children in the vaccine group and then cunningly used the term control for a control group in which they murdered 28 children. Now, the reason I said murdered and the reason why I use that term is because it's exactly what it was. Because it turns out that this control group was not a saline injection. It was not some sort of innocuous, innocent thing. It was actually a cocktail of other known pathogenic disease-carrying injections. The control group was known to kill people, and the experimental control group was actually theoretically maybe going to kill people. And what we did was we actually went ahead and murdered them all. And cunningly, under Article 5, Section 13, which I've put on this slide, I want you to understand why I said, at its formation in 1947, when the WHO was funded and founded, it was funded and founded by people intent to commit a crime because of their own language. Section 13 of Article 5 ends with the following statement: immunity from personal arrest or detention, blah, 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 immunity from legal process of every kind. Now, if you didn't intend to commit a crime, why would you need to give yourself permanent and absolute immunity from every form of prosecution, and it's worse, even investigation for prosecution of every kind? People sit there and pretend, well, that's like diplomatic immunity. Do you realize this isn't even meeting the standard of diplomatic immunity? This is a criminal organization who set in motion their own law to protect themselves against crimes they knew they were going to commit. And when I say they knew they were going to commit, I mean they knew it. Because their first Director General, none other than Dr. René Sand, who happened to be in the hospitality of the Germans in Dachau in 1940 earlier, in 1947, mysteriously, with the largesse of the Rockefeller Foundation, was nominated to become the first Director General of the WHO. And within 5 short years, René Sand decided to authorize the real purpose of the WHO in writing by then Director General Dr. Brock Chisholm, who advocated for population control as its primary objective. Does that sound like public health to anyone in this room? This is not public health. This is the advancement of the same genocidal program that began with the Carnegie Foundation's funding of the eugenics office at Cold Spring Labs in the United States in 1913 under the philanthropy of Andrew Carnegie. People, stop fooling yourself. We debate the leaves on the tree of what we call this pandemic thing, but we're not going to the root. This was an organized crime, racketeering entity set up to give itself first absolute immunity and then execute its plans to make sure it controls who lives, who dies, and who gets any chance at life. And if you think that I am somehow inflating numbers, let me be unambiguous. Under every treatment of tax provision, if I were to tell you that there is an 88% controlling interest of any organization, you might conclude that that actually aggregates into a controlling interest. And it turns out that if we look at the foundation donations to the World Health Organization, 88% of those come from a single organization, the Gates Foundation. That constitutes a violation of every competitiveness law in Europe and every competitiveness law in the United States. This is absolutely not only not an independent, charitably funded donation, but more importantly, under the tax laws on both sides of the Atlantic, this constitutes directed donations which specifically are forbidden and do not have any place anywhere in the Charter of the World Health Organization or any of the UN-affiliated organizations. When I say this is a crime, I mean it's a tax crime, a racketeering crime, a money laundering crime, and now the crime of racketeering leading to murder and global terrorism. Next slide. I told you that the second thing after they plan it is they fund it. And why don't we use the criminals' language in their own words, because it's the best way to say it. When they actually planned the release of the use of a biologically modified chimera associated with the model derived from coronavirus, they actually said the following: to sustain the funding base beyond the crisis, we need to increase the public understanding for the needful medical countermeasures such as a pan-influenza or pan-coronavirus vaccine. Now, let me pause for just one moment and remind you that the crisis that they were speaking of was a crisis of diminishing funding. There was no health crisis. This was a crisis of their coffers were starting to run dry. That's the crisis. And let's read on. A key driver is the media, and the economics will follow the hype. We need to use that hype to our advantage to get to the real issues. Investors will respond if they see profit at the end of the process. That is officially the statement made by the conspiratorial cabal that by that time was the decade of vaccines put in motion in 2011 by the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board of the World Health Organization, and it was the funding base for Peter Daszak's partnership with the chimeric production of pathogens both in North Carolina and in Wuhan. So don't tell me that we have to do an investigation into where this came from. The criminals have admitted to it in their own words. Next slide. And now we get the fun one that no one in Congress is willing to address, which is the elephant in the room. On October the 21st, 2014, despite the multiple conversations between Senator Rand Paul and Anthony Fauci, where we've been told that Rand Paul has done everything he can to put Fauci on the ropes, he has had in his possession the letter that you see on the left. And it is the letter, conveniently on NIAID letterhead, sent to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which unambiguously states that during the gain-of-function moratorium, which, by the way, if we use the word moratorium, feels like that means you're supposed to stop. Why don't we go ahead and look at two pieces of this letter? First, the second bullet under Project 1, which, by the way, was not part of the original grant. This was to look at the novel functions of the virus pathogenesis in vivo. You know what that means? In living systems. The grant was supposed to be clinical simulations and models, but this grant was modified with this letter to say we were going to authorize gain-of-function research during the moratorium in living systems. And then we love the last paragraph of this letter, which conveniently says, as your grant is currently funded, this pause is voluntary. How many times have you met a voluntary moratorium? And the best part about it is that if we look at the very last line, or continue to conduct the applicable gain-of-function research until the end of the currently active budget period. But here comes the problem. You know who is supplying the budget? An indefinite term, unlimited amount contract from DARPA and from NIH. Isn't it convenient to have a perpetually funded project that needs to stop when the money runs out, when you find out that there is no point where the money runs out because there is no end to the thing that has no end? And lest you think that I'm making an allegation, which I'm not, I'm making an accusation. Let's be clear. And there's a big difference. I'm not alleging anything. They actually went to the trouble of telling us that it was going to be the Wuhan virus that was going to get us. As you see on the right-hand side of the screen, published in 2016, March 14th of 2016, the SARS-like Wuhan Institute of Virology Virus 1, and I quote, is poised for human emergence. Does that sound like we're just surprised that something in Wuhan went a little haywire in December of 2019? Or does it feel like we were told, look at Wuhan, and look at coronavirus, and look at what we've been doing to manipulate coronavirus in Wuhan and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and lo and behold, we're going to go ahead and tell you that we're ready to release it in 2016. Next slide. We're almost done. And then they created it. Now, all of you know that I am criticized globally for my use of the term biological warfare. I do that because I am credentialed to do that. I happen to be, for the United States government, in the early part of the 2000s and the latter part of the 90s, a person who was sent around the world to look at the proliferation of biological and chemical weapons. I'm acutely familiar with the definition of what a biological warfare agent is in the 18 U.S. Code, the criminal code of violations of biological and chemical weapons. And so my assessment is, in fact, professional and right. And the reason for that is I'm the one credentialed to make that determination for the United States government for many years. That's why I say it. But let's pretend for the moment that I'm just a nut job. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. So why don't we look at what the criminals said themselves, shall we? In 2005, at a conference sponsored by DARPA and the MITRE Corporation, Ralph Baric, the architect of the lethal strand that has been injected into millions and billions of people's arms, that Ralph Baric was sponsored to present the following, and let's go ahead and use his words, presentation: synthetic coronaviruses, biohacking, bio-warfare enabling technologies. Does that sound like a public health distribution program? Does that sound like something that is accidentally misinterpreted to mean something else? Or does biological warfare enabling technologies sound like not countermeasures or pandemic preparedness. It sounds to me like biological warfare enabling technologies. And the reason why I have that hunch is what followed was he received, next to his NIAID grants, non-competitive DARPA grants in matching funds for over $140 million of aggregate funding going into his and his related programs on synthetic biological warfare enabling technologies. So do I have a problem calling the injection a biological warfare enabling technology? Absolutely not, because that's what they called it. And we know that they knew they called it that on September 18th, 2019. Because on September 18th, 2019, the racketeering, co-conspiring cabal of interlocking directorates, also known as the World Health Organization, said that they were going to conduct an experience for the world that was going to be a rapidly spreading pandemic due to a lethal respiratory pathogen. The lethality in that statement is the problem. They didn't say we're going to maybe get a little bit of sniffles going around. They said we were going to actually have the promulgation of a deadly agent. And the stated reason, in September 2020, the progress indicator is that the world would accept a universal vaccine. Not, we'll look at other options of treatment. Not, we'll have a look at what might be early intervention, as Dr. McCullough has so clearly advocated for in many, many, many instances. Not that. We stated on September 18th, 2019, we were intending to kill. And we were intending to kill to create the fear that would drive people to accept something that without coercion, no one would have accepted. And that's published by the criminal racketeers. Next slide, and there's only 2 to go if you're following. Deploy and profit from it. We were told investors will respond if they see profit at the end of the process, and lo and behold, guess what they saw? Profit at the end of the process. 2022, $100 billion for Pfizer of public funds. Moderna, after lying to the Congress in October of 2020 when they were asked to actually verify whether NIAID was promoting an injection that would enrich NIAID, where Anthony Fauci and the entire team at NIH said that they had no financial interest in their recommendation, they receive a back payment royalty of $400 million for the first payment of the royalty. $400 million. More than any Institute of Health has ever received in a single payment for a single invention in the history of American medical research. And lo and behold, what do we receive after that? A request from the World Health Organization to expand its budget by 11% to make sure that the people who profited from it donate to it. And guess what they just did? They laundered the money right back. That's what they did. Next, and now you get the final slide. This is not a public health crime. This is actually not a constitutional crime. This is a criminal act done by a criminal institution established to enable criminal behavior since its foundation in 1947. That is what this is. And we should not be debating the merits of democracy or liberty or anything else, as irrational as that would be if we stood at a bank robbery and debated the merits of printing dollar bills. The problem is not the dollar bills, it's the bank robber. And the problem here is not health, and it's not public health, and it's not the suppression of information and the suppression of dissident views and the absolute unconscionable treatment of physicians around the world and academicians around the world who spoke out against this. That's not the crime. The crime is that we had criminal racketeers who conspired and developed a, quote, emergency. The same criminal racketeers planned, manufactured, and did all agency capture to make sure that you were told that you would use terms that they tell you to use: vaccine, face mask, health, social distancing, none of which had ordinary use definition. So we just used them. Criminal racketeers price fixed with interlocking directorates where known competitors came together and fixed prices in direct collusion in violation of both European Union standards and in violation of both the Sherman and the Clayton Act in the United States. These were crimes. It was organized crime, and we should treat it as such. Criminal racketeers publicly lied under oath, and this resulted in the death and destruction of liberty, and most importantly, the death and destruction of the integrity of well-meaning people who sit here today doing everything they can within their power to try to treat the calamities created by this catastrophe. I will not for a moment denigrate the multiple contributions of amazing academic and medical professionals who've tried desperately to step into the gap and stop the corrupt outcomes of these crimes. But I will, without doubt, say the following. Until we treat this as a criminal conspiracy of criminal racketeers resulting in global terrorism for the purpose of profiteering and murder, until we have that conversation, we're having the wrong conversation. Because we are not here to debate the merits of a modified agreement for a criminal racketeering organization. We are here to end the criminal organization itself. This is my call to every single person on this planet. Don't just limit the power of the WHO. Destroy the WHO. Thank you very much.
Dr. Martin, when he talks about the way they laundered the money, the way that the Bill and Melinda Gates, there are so many, now you can't dispute it. You can't say, well, Frank and Anastasia, well, that's the... No way. It goes into bank accounts. It goes into agreements. It goes into the original charter of the WHO, who says you're going to hold us safe. You're not going to be able to jail us or execute us. It comes from Nazi Germany, guys that were experimenting. This.
Listen, there's a reason why Melinda Gates jumped off that ship, okay? And there's a reason why Bill Gates right now is giving away all his money. I think he's trying to get mercy. Let me put it to you that way. The truth is out there. The media is choosing not to share it. But now with the change in our media and the podcasting and the free formation of information that's out there through X and through other platforms, we're finding out the truth. It's shocking.
It's more than shocking. This is, and the doctor says, look, this is an accusation. It's not an allegation. The guy knows. He worked for the United States government and said, I know what biological warfare is. So you, the people, you were a victim of biological warfare. And I'm not even sure if, okay, so this thing originated in China. But
it was paid by us, the
China's
taxpayer.
a co-conspirator. Yes. The WHO and the American government operatives were the guys that contracted China. This is beyond, and it's a year old. So, my wife says, Frank, you're the only guy that goes to jail, because these people, right? I took an 8-minute walk in the Capitol, right?
It was a walk,
right?
Like a tourist.
These guys are worldwide pandemic, right? A MAGA tourist, and these guys, what? Fauci has the auto pen, he's got a pardon? No, this is...
a blanket pardon for almost a decade where there was no crime out there yet.
Right.
Please, it's so offensive.
They saw this and they knew this, so please share that video. Share this show with your friends and family for the doubters, because this is it. This guy, he has the credentials, he has the receipts, the proof. America needs to take this and finally have justice for all those that were vaccinated, vaccine damage, vaccine injuries. And I really hope that Robert F. Kennedy, Maha, gets on top of this too, because this cannot be the end. You cannot watch this and then just let it go
and Frank,
away.
Two things have to happen. One is there has to be justice, and people have to get hung. If they don't go to jail, this is going to happen over and over again. That's number one.
Oh.
And number two, the big follow-up is this has to be a Nuremberg
trials.
Trial. Yes. This has to never happen again, and we can never forget.
It will happen again. And people will not, they'll just think that there's conspiratorial, they'll think that, and the media covered this up too. They knew. As Jake Tapper puts his book out, so you're going to tell me they kind of knew about Joe Biden's dementia, but then they didn't know anything about, right, the WHO and SARS-CoV-2/COVID Kung Flu China virus. Are you kidding? They're all lying to you. We're not. They are. There's the proof. So take it, share it, and do something about it.
So, Frank, here's the homage to all the folks out there like us who, took our lashings during COVID. We were called inconsiderate. We were called selfish. We were called a whole lot of things.
Murderers.
And so this scripture of the week is actually Matthew 10:22, and it says, "You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved." Boy, does that apply today more than ever.
That's a point in the pursuit of truth. And that's what we're here on this show. We want to pursue truth. And if you're innocent and truthful, we will not be the victims. The evil will be the victims.
Taking the lashings, folks, for something bigger than yourself.
Yep.
That's what we did, and that's what we pray for the future for every American to keep on that fight. And you know what? Are we a little bit...
Be saved.
Are we a little bit ticked off as
after
patriots?
After today's show, absolutely. So when you see how this is a thread, we threaded the needle. We show you how everything happened, from the conspiracies, the Bidens, the medical cover-ups, the lies, and then the proof that this was all a big scamdemic by more than just the WHO. But we show you the beginnings of the WHO, their contracts, the language, and then you see the media covering it up. We have a lot of work to do, but with President Trump, Robert F. Kennedy, Maha, and us, we will make the difference. We're going to jump into now, We the People by Kid Rock. It's great, and it fits today's show 100%. So listen to this, then share, get active, and make it happen, America.
And just know one thing, viewer discretion is advised. There are some F-bombs in there.
Totally.
But we as good Christians will forgive that because, we should be ticked off, and we are. So this is to the government. Here's to the WHO. Here's to the liars and the conspirators and all that.
Testify, as Kid Rock does. God bless you, and we'll see you next time on the MAGA Kingdom Report.
Reserve the right to scream, fuck you! Wear your mask, take your pills. Now a whole generation's mentally ill. Man, fuck Fauci. But COVID's near, it's coming to town.